Hey everybody, how you doing? It's John Brewer here with Beth Azor, and we've been talking a little bit about leases lately, with me doing second generation restaurant space, and actually kind of leads into the next book that we're going to be reading for the book club, which is Danny Meyer's Setting the Table. And I remembered reading it, I've already read it, and spoiler alert, one of the things he talks about for leases that's very important is assignability. So I've been dealing with some cases and looking at leases and the definition of assignability and some of the variables that could be in place. Anyway, Beth and I have been having some interesting conversations, so we thought that there might be some good information to share. So Beth?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you are a restaurant and you want to assign your lease, and that's the situation we're talking about right now, where there's some restaurateurs out there that are, for whatever reason, want someone to take over their lease. So John and I have been looking at a lot of leases, and there's like 5 or 6 areas that we focus on right away. So the first thing we're going to do is look at the assignment language. We've seen assignment language where there are no approval rights for the landlords. There's a lot of approval rights for the landlords. Assignment provision is only in effect when the tenant is current.
Right.
We had a situation where the tenant closed and had stopped paying rent. Our client thought, oh, well, I can just assign the lease, and we're like, you're in default. So you
lose all those rights once you default.
Exactly. So you have to either reopen, which in this case the person wasn't going to do, or if you're open, stay open and continue to pay the rent so that you maintain your rights of assignability. We've also seen recently where there was a lease clause that said, if you want to assign, send us all of the information about the replacement tenant, and the landlord has the right to terminate your lease within 45 days.
Right.
So that's really not an assignment provision or right at all. If you hire us, we find the prospect, we like the guy, we look at his financials, we look at his menu, his business plan, perfect guy to take the place of our guy, and then we say, hey, Mr. Landlord, we want to assign our client space to this guy, and then the landlord has the right in the lease document to say, sorry, we're terminating your lease. So when you as a restaurant are negotiating a lease, make sure your assignability paragraph, and I think Danny Meyer, I haven't started reading my book yet, for my book club, April 20th, by the way, but that's why he says it's so important. So after you've reviewed that, and after we've reviewed that, the next thing that I like to look at is the use clause, because if a pizza guy is hiring John to sublet his space, and the use clause is, this is a pizza restaurant and can be no other use or purpose, now John's pool of potential candidates is limited to pizza restaurants.
Right.
We can certainly go to the landlord and get approval to lease to an Asian fusion restaurant, but they don't have to give that to us because the use clause is very specific. So again, when you're negotiating your leases, maybe it's I'm a pizza restaurant, but in the event I want to assign, maybe that use clause could be broadened. But certainly you have to take into account in respect the other exclusives in the shopping center. Another point we just dealt with where we have been hired and we're starting our search of a replacement restaurant, we have to honor all the exclusives of that property. So very important that we know what those exclusives are from the landlord, the big landlord, so that we don't bring in, bakery cafe and there's an exclusive on one. So that. The other thing is, if it's a franchise, what we came across in another situation, we've been very busy in all of these situations.
Yes, we have.
You're learning a lot.
I'm learning a lot. The learning curve is
He knows all about restaurants,
going
and I'm helping him
parabolic.
with leases. But when there's a franchisor involved, our client can want to assign all he wants, but the franchisor sometimes has a document in the lease that says, no,
right.
This is our space. If you, the franchisee, aren't going to make it, we want to come in and step in. So you, the franchisee, have to get a release from your franchisor before you hire us, because we don't want to go out and John doesn't want to spend time looking for a replacement and then has someone ready and then the franchisor says, oh, knock, 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 by the way, remember that lease? And then lastly, in one of these, not a new situation, one of these same ones I'm talking about, the landlord had, I think it's called subordination rights. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but had control of all of the FF&E.
Right.
Remember, so that one particular client.
That's another one that guy I went to today, the same thing, yeah. Landlord owns the FF&E.
Right, so they're right in the lease, you know, if the tenant is in default, landlord owns all the FF&E. So in this particular meeting we had, the guy was like, yeah, I want key money for everything I have here. And we're like, okay, sounds good, a great market, potential key money. And then John reads the lease and goes, you don't own the FF&E.
Right.
You don't have the ability to sell that. So all these things can be avoided in the upfront lease negotiation, but not if you are in an A++ location. I mean, if you go to some of the hottest markets in South Florida, the landlords are going to be tough and they're going to want all these things that I just discussed. So you have to decide, you know, what's important. But it's interesting, going back to Danny Meyer, start with the assignability factor.
I think it's almost like a prenup when you're getting married. No one wants to talk about it because everybody thinks the marriage is going to be beautiful and we're all going to be happily ever after. But it's our job as tenant reps to make sure that we at least advise on the language that's going in there, so that in the event, of course it's never going to happen, but in the event.
It's never going to happen with our clients.
Exactly.
Because they all have wonderful concepts. Proven, right?
Exactly.
For sure.
But in the event, you know, we got to make sure that we can mitigate as much risk as possible, so that if we do have to maneuver later on, it's as favorable as possible as we can get it for our tenant.
Absolutely. I mean, I think as a landlord, you know, I kind of go back and forth. Sometimes I want the tenant to assign their lease, and sometimes I want to step in. You know, if the space is under market on rent, I want to take over and step in. If I had that clause that I could terminate, that's kind of a really, you know, there's landlord leases and then there's tenant leases, and boy, that's really over on the spectrum of the landlord lease. But we're having fun, right? We're busy.
Absolutely, yeah. We're cranking up.
And we're learning a lot.
That's it. So I hope this was informative. We hope you guys like it. Give us comments, anything you have to add, any questions you may have.
And do you have a YouTube channel?
I do, actually. It's funny you mention that. South Florida's restaurant guy. I'm doing interviews, reviews. Went to La Ventana the other day down in Miami, a little tiny joint. We're on our way to go see the Pretenders over at the Miami Fillmore, and a friend had recommended this place. Had like 30 seats in it. Absolutely fantastic food, great price point, and the people, the service was excellent. So I'm going to be posting that soon too. But yeah.